Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Sakey speaking. Well, I'm really concerned about Marsden being closed down. I have many reasons to be concerned, but I have done a bit of research around that, so I'll just briefly cover that. So prior to 2023, shipping worldwide was to become compliant to the Paris Agreement. So we're talking about green shipping, risk of disruption to global shipping. That this would officially activate this IMO rules, international rules for global shipping worldwide. The commitment, the full transition to accommodate the Paris Agreement to develop, deploy deep sea zero emissions vessels by UN Agenda 2030. So UN Agenda 2030, you all need to keep an eye on that, the sustainabilities, because this is what we're talking about. This is about advertising, but it's about controlling you, controlling your movements, what you eat, everything, every aspect of your life. So the International Maritime Organization, which is the IMO, have insisted on zero emissions, fuels and technology, zero emissions global shipping vessels after 2020, totally decarbonised by 2030. 21st of October, there was a report by Harvard Institute, and it was called Operations and Supply Chain Management of Climate Regulations, the disruption of global shipping supply chains, and EU regulations that will be passed by December 2022 that are already there. The Global Green Shipping Action Plan was introduced by officially implementing it in January 2023. So it's already there. It's already actioned. The report stated that the initial phase of the humongous global operation will cost a massive disruption to shipping worldwide and a huge cost too. So many carbon emissions are far too difficult to eliminate when it comes to global shipping because the distance they have to travel and with refueling. There's not that opportunity to refuel. So the new IMO rules require individual ships to measure, report carbon intensity index in the form of efficiency and the dead weight tonnage, how much weight it's allowed to carry in the cargo, the crew, fresh water, passengers, supplies, the whole dead weight of the ship, and also what type of fuel that it consumes, how far it travels in 1 year, from 1 year to the next. And this is all mandatory for ships over 5,000 dead weight ton. It's called DWT, dead weight tonnage. So each ship is graded A, B, C, D, E, and has to be compliant. The grading criteria actually is increased and is more restrictive as the years go on. So the owners of vessels must comply with this. If they don't, they could have their ships scrapped. And this is a very costly thing for ship owners, because they have to do refits of engines, hulls, emissions controls, so they can adapt to different fuels, etc. So it also means that they want to restrict the distance that shipping goes and that they carry less cargo. So this is massive. So some cargo will be less frequent in different ports. So as far as Marsden is closed down, where does that leave us? Is there a security risk to our fuel? I would say so, and I've always thought so too. And the government did admit that there could be risks to our fuel security with Marsden closing. So for some ports, there will be less trade, even the elimination of some services. So it'll be much, much harder as the years go by for shipping to be compliant, as these regulations are will get stricter and stricter as the years go by. So sooner or later, many ships will have to be replaced. Some ports may see less trade, elimination of some services altogether, and upgrading of engines, emission controls, engines refitted, and alternative fuels, the optimising of flow of water around the hulls, etc., etc. So the CEO of Ocean Network Express, a global container shipping company, stated in a conference he estimated this would cost global shipping approximately 1.5 trillion over the next couple of decades to be compliant to the IMO rules. These are UN rules for the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030. So EU emissions trading scheme, well, New Zealand government has signed a free trade agreement with the EU just recently. Now, what does that mean? Because the EU stated that shipping lines will have to purchase an allowance of 50% emissions for voyages connecting to the EU ports. And they talk about a carbon border adjustment mechanism to become fully operational by 2026, putting tax on imported products, imports, exports, will all be impacted, and it will be impacted on the prices of food and services containers when it comes to New Zealand, hugely so. So that's what we're looking at. Shipping rates increasing. Already container rates have hugely increased. So the IMO international rules favour a lower volume of trade lanes, so smaller, less trade lanes with less frequency and higher costs. So the international IMO policies and regulations to mitigate climate change as to the Paris Agreement is designed will have a major impact on supply chains worldwide. So increased costs, practicalities of shipping logistics, and this is what the Harvard report review said in 2022. And they said now's the time to start planning. They could see all this happening. So that was a warning for us. So the government must have known this. Of course, they knew it. So Ministry of Business and Innovation and Employment reported, the government, our fuel security in New Zealand remains critical to business operations, economy and social connections. In minimum stock holding obligations in June 2023, that's just recently, the government introduced the Fuel Industry Amendment Bill. This is a review of New Zealand's fuel security policy in the light of the geopolitical environment and uncertainties in international national fuel markets and the clean energy transition and the closure of Marsden. And they said that the closure of Marsden in April 2022. So they are ignorant, and ignorance isn't bliss. When the government state the refinery closure does not have a major impact on New Zealand's fuel security. And they embrace the closure of the refinery. They said, as this diversifies away from a single point of failure, they call it a failure. And they said we need to build resilience to fuel supplies, disruptions to international oil and fuel markets. So they say that they embraced Marsden's oil closure, oil refinery closure. And that's what they've said. Fuel stocking in New Zealand by government procurement and storage will be 70 million litres of diesel. That's 7 days of normal use. But we go further down here and we talk about the critical fuel for running emergency services and transporting food. And they're relying on that for diesel. So the obligation is for 5 fuel importers with access to bulk facilities. They are BP, Gull, Mobil, Tasma Fuels and Z Energy. So with the average of 24 days use of petrol in New Zealand, jet fuel, 24 days, and 21 days of diesel. And this obligation will remain for 5 years unless there are broader issues that the government bring into place. So we're talking about the government's emission budget here. This is the considerations they're saying that could change this. The emissions reduction budget, the plan, the fuel demand, transport fuel mix, the resilience of fuel supply chains. And New Zealand's used to get a small supply of oil actually from Russia, but now they don't. They hold their stocks, their emergency stocks, in the UK and Spain. And they've already got into those emergency stocks already, 3 times already, I believe, millions of barrels of oil. So Marsden, they previously supplied 70% of the country's refined oil. The remainder came from Australia, South Korea, and the Americas. And so that meant, the closure of Marsden meant that we are totally 100% reliant on imports. So New Zealand is a member of the International Energy Agency. The government has an obligation to hold emergency oil stock, net oil imports. New Zealand has emergency stocks, as I say, in Spain and in UK. So if there's disruptions to the shipping lanes, this crisis, because we are in geopolitical crisis right now, and now we have the EU and the price hikes and their rules, which are very strict. They've already affected other countries that have got into EU trade agreements. And of course, this new January 2023 green shipping means that there's a high risk of disruptions to shipping worldwide. So what does that mean for us in New Zealand? What if we can't get oil supplies? What then? Can you imagine what will happen? I hate to even think about it, but this government is freaking crazy. It's crazy to close our oil refinery down. It's insanity. It really is. And they should be opening that refinery right now. They have no conscience. They haven't taken into consideration the risks it holds economically, financially, socially. And you can't see your family? What about the food you eat? The same with the emissions in the trees, the trillions of trees that are supposed to be growing in the future. That's not going to feed you. Actually, it's taken farming land. So it's not just the farmers that are being targeted, it's all of us. Wake up, New Zealand.